And welcome to our meeting today. Um, we are live now. We'll be waiting 1 minute to start um, with our meeting today. If you are live with us right now, please, if someone could just, there you go. That's what I was wondering and waiting for my first good morning. Good morning, Gisele. I miss you. So good to see you here. And who else is there with us this morning? So, good morning. Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to have everyone here with us. Anyone else out there? People are arriving. And now it's 11 o'clock sharp. Yes, right. JC, good morning. Good morning. Good to see you. Juan, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Carlos, nice to see you. It's so good to be here on Sunday. I miss you all very much. As time goes by, it seems like the missing keeps growing, although we are, you know, trying to, Fatima, good morning, dear. We are, we understand that God has a plan and we're doing our best in accepting and in adapting, but we do miss seeing you in person and hugging you in our Sunday meetings. Regina, good morning. Let's start with our reading for today. Um, it's from Living Spring, and it's chapter 109, Christ's Example. For he knew what was in a man, is in the Gospel of John 2:25. Yes, Jesus knew what was in men and women, but he never let himself be influenced negatively. He knew that usury lived with Zacchaeus, but he led him from miserliness to generosity. He knew that Mary Magdalene was possessed by evil spirits, but he renewed her for pure love. He recognized the intellectual vanity of Nicodemus, but he gave him new concepts about the grandeur and magnificence of light. He identified the weakness of Simon Peter, but little by little he installed in the disciple's heart a spiritual strength that would make him the pillar of newly born Christianity. He saw the doubts of Thomas, but never forsook him. He knew the darkness that dwelt in Judas, but he did not deny him his affection. Above all, Jesus was concerned with providing each soul a broader vision of life and in allotting to each spirit effective resources for renewal for the good. Therefore, do not condemn your neighbor because you can see his or her imperfections. Following Christ's example, help as many people as you can. The divine friend knows what is in us. He knows the dark and heavy burden of our past, the difficulties of our present, full of hesitation and wrongs. Nevertheless, he lovingly holds out his hands to us. What a beautiful page. We will start our meeting, as always, with our initial prayers. So I invite you all to join me at this time by saying, Dear Father, thank you so much for the opportunity of a new day, of this virtual space that allow us to be present, united in our friendship and love for the center, for each other, and most of all, our love for you and God our Father. We ask you to please be with all of us, no matter where we are, because we're all connected in our thoughts, in our desire to learn and to grow. Asking particularly a special blessing for our friend Heather, who is joining us today, so she too can be inspired and can be certain that all of us will be following her words and being open to receive not only the result of her studies, but also the affection from her heart. So thank you again for everything, and so be it. All right, dear friends, before I bring Heather into the studio, I just would like to remind and kindly ask each one of you to remember that although we are meeting virtually, we still have our physical space that we are maintaining. And if you have not heard yet, we are actually in the process of closing by the end of August our physical space because our contract ended. And so we will be dealing with the expenses of the move and looking for a new place. Soon we'll be looking for a new place, and usually there's remodeling. So if you can, if you're able, we have a bar right here on the top of the screen. Please open your cell phones, your iPhones, and you can open your camera and scan it for a contribution. We still need your contributions. If you can do that, please help us out. Okay, we'll be out there throughout the entire meeting today, and I'll remind you again at the end if you can to please do that. So I don't want to take any more time for Heather. I am bringing Heather in right now to be with us. Hi, Heather.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Welcome to our stream. I am going to step out right now so you can go on, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Susanna. Good morning to everyone. Gosh, it's really nice to know that I'm connecting with you, even though I can't see you all. I miss you all too. And with the different spiritist activity that I've been involved in over these past weeks, it's just really nice to connect to the Conscious Living group. So it makes me happy this morning and ready to get started. And we have kind of a fun topic today. I mean, it's a little bit of a lighter topic, but let's not confuse that with the significance of the implications of the overall message today. And we're going to be talking about an idea that came to mind, kind of like the social media of spirits. And I was inspired to put together a topic like this because I was discussing with a friend of mine the algorithms that Facebook uses to determine what content they show us, right? Because probably most of us are Facebook users, and you know that with all the pages that you like, the groups that you join, the people that you're friends with, we can't possibly see everything that's out there, right? So there are certain rules in place where Facebook basically says, okay, what do we interact with the most, right? So what friends of ours, what kind of posts that they're creating are we clicking on to comment or to share? What kind of comments or reactions are we giving? Are we, showing happiness or anger or sadness? What groups do we interact with the most? What pages are we following? These algorithms feed data into Facebook, and then it kind of says like, okay, that's what you're most interested in. I'm going to share more of that content with you. And it's all generated, like I said, by what we do. And I was just kind of thinking how this is a little bit the way that the law of attraction works. So there's a lot of information out there, right, on the law of attraction. Different sources, many of them non-spiritist, but there's some basic ideas that they all have in common. And whatever you want to call it, if you're creating your intent or telling the universe what you want, making for an expansion of what you focus on, there's this kind of shared concept of sort of like a boomerang effect where you put something out there and you get something back, something related to what you put out there. So social media albeit by intentional design, can give us a good example of how the law of attraction works through those algorithms that I was mentioning. So this morning, for the social media example, we're going to use Facebook to build an analogy. Now, in the Facebook universe, we express our thought or our intent, our ask, if you will, right? We do that manually. This is what I was saying. So it's based on what we follow, what we interact with, and in doing that, we can attract company. So we draw friends, we attract followers, and then together, in this community with one another, we collaborate in some kind of direction of thought with all of our likes, our comments, and our shares. Now, all of these actions, meaning what we do on Facebook, how we engage, it all originates from our thought. What we think about then leads to what we do, what we click on. And this is kind of a manifestation of our intent, right? What we're asking for, and our reaction. So how we respond to what we encounter in Facebook. The end result becomes like a network of all of us doing that kind of thing. And it's sort of like this exchange of ideas, of thoughts, opinions, even energies, because our thoughts, the words that we use, those little emoticons that we apply, right? They carry an energy with them, both when we're using them and when someone else receives them. So this morning we're going to use all of that and our experience with it as a comparison point in order to discuss the social communication and interaction among spirits. So first, let's review the idea that in the Spiritist teaching, what we learn from Spiritism is that the origin of thought is in the spirit, right? The immortal soul. Thought is actually defined as an attribute of the spirit. So it's not the brain. The brain is a physical organ. Thought itself comes from the spirit. This is a way that spirits also communicate with one another and thereby attract and influence each other. And it's how even discarded spirits influence us. I'm pretty sure you've all heard what is probably the most cited quote in Spiritism, at least from the Spirit's book, and definitely from this particular topic of thought. But let me see. This question number 459 from the Spirit's book, right? Where the question says, do spirits have any influence on our thoughts and actions? And the Spirit said, their influence on you in this regard is greater than you suppose, for very frequently it is they who guide you. Many of us have probably seen this question and answer a lot, but how often do we really, reflect on that and keep that in mind? That's part of the process of our vigilance. So, following this Q&A, the spirits go on to tell us how our thought processes end up being like a mix of our own organic thoughts and the thoughts that we start kind of becoming receptive to from the spirits. So much so, what they're telling us here is that something we're not even sure unless we are paying very close attention and we know ourselves very well, right? To tell which of those thoughts may be ours and which we may simply be picking up on. Well, going back now to Facebook for our analogy in the comparison, I want you to imagine this kind of interchange of thoughts among spirits, incarnate and discarnate, as a social media of the spirits. And we're going to compare that to the social media platform of Facebook, We're going to look at how there are some similarities and some differences, but in general, how our experience, even here in the material world with something like Facebook, can help us to digest the concepts that we pick up from Spiritism about our spiritual reality. And let me start by saying that in this social media of spirits, thought is everything. According to the Spiritist teachings, we are immersed in what could be described as a sort of ocean of mental currents that in Spiritism, you may have heard we call it the psychosphere, right? And in this collective atmosphere of all these crisscrossing and mutually influencing thought waves, we as spirits, both incarnate, discarnate, we constantly contribute to this mental environment, and likewise, we're ultimately influenced by one another's thoughts. Generally speaking, discarnate spirits have a greater ease of capturing content, let's say, from the other spirits. You and I, on the other hand, being at this moment incarnated in the physical body, this denser matter that influences us to some degree, so that we have a much slower connection to the psychosphere and a lot more interference. Some, however, are quote-unquote technologically equipped in this lifetime with special faculties that we call collectively mediumship, that do allow some kind of access, conscious or not, that is greater than what most of us have while incarnate. Even so, we're all subject to the influence of other beings by way of this psychospheric immersion and our own intuition. Now, for our comparison between Facebook and the interaction of thoughts among spirits, I want to present actually the first of a couple visuals I have prepared to kind of set the stage. It's this little matrix here that will set the stage for our further discussion. We need, in order for the exchange, some kind of infrastructure, right, that works as this system of interconnection. So on the Facebook side, we have nowadays the internet, which serves as an interconnection of many computer networks. For the psychosphere, this is, as I alluded to before, the interconnection of all of our minds. And actually, our minds are, in a way, like networks within our beings. So to illustrate that, I want to turn to some text from André Luiz. But let me say that our physical body, let's remember, okay, our physical body is only a reflection of the conditions and characteristics of our spiritual body that stays with us, whether incarnate or not. So our physical body reflects the spiritual body at whatever given point in time we're referring to. So both over the course of a spirit's evolution, how that changes, right? Generally speaking, in that greater length of time, and even in its more subtle variations, of course, like the hours, the days, and the years, even within a physical incarnation. So, the spirit, André Luiz, in the book Evolution in Two Worlds, he talks about the spiritual body. And he says that through it, we possess all the automatic tools that govern the billions of microscopic entities that serve the intelligence in our circles of action. These are tools acquired slowly by the being over millennia upon millennia of effort and recapitulation in the multiple sectors of the soul's evolution. So all these capacities that we have been developed over a long period of time, and not simply, one lifetime. It's not that it's just, put together for us as soon as we're born. As far as the human species, this has been developing throughout evolution. Well, part of what facilitates this orchestration, right, that's enabled by the physical body is the activity of our energy centers that we have within this body, what we call the perispirit. These are vital centers, also called chakras, among other names. And Andre Luis describes the vital centers found in the spiritual body, describing them as fulcrums of energy, operating under the guidance of the intelligent soul. Remember, we said that thought and intelligence belong to the spirit. And so the vital centers are under the command of the intelligence. Well, one of these vital centers is known as the crown center. I have a picture here of those chakras or energy centers. This crown center, Andre Luis says, oversees the other vital centers which obey its impulses originating from the spirit, just like the secondary engines of a power plant respond to the command of a main engine. So going back to that idea of a network, I will add that Andre Luis explains that this crown center is located, or we could say kind of aligns with in terms of spatial relationships, in the central area of the brain. That's where it's sort of aligned spatially. And it governs, he says, the functional activity of the organs described in our earthly physiology, right? Physically speaking. So I'd like to actually read now a little bit of a further quote where he explains more about this, in particular the crown center. And he says, from it runs the current of vitalizing energy comprised of spiritual stimuli that diffuse the mental matter that encases it, transmitting the live reflections of our sentiments, ideas, and actions to the other centers of the soul, just as these other interdependent centers imprint similar reflections on the organs and other aspects of our individual constitution, molding in us the pleasant or unpleasant effects of our influence and conduct. The mind prepares the creations that flow from its will by utilizing the elements that surround it. And the crown center automatically embarks on the task of establishing the nature of these creations' responsibility, marking in the individual the happy or unhappy consequences of his or her conscious undertakings on the pathway of destiny. Okay? Now, with that in mind, about our minds actually being like a network, let's go back to the matrix here that I have. So, the exchange is going to involve a collection of information that we all access through our connection to that infrastructure. In the internet, we call it the World Wide Web or just the web. So for the psychosphere, I'm just going to say in general thought, okay? There have to be some kind of rules in place in order for this to stay stable and work and allow for this exchange. On the internet, it's called the Internet Protocol. But when it comes to spirit life, we call it natural law, right? Divine laws. That's where we have the law of, laws like action, reaction. And these laws are going to control what happens in response to the actions that we take. Well, something needs to identify you. If you're part of a network, whether it be your, through your computer or your own being, interacting with other elements of the same type, right? Something needs to identify you and making you distinguished from the other content providers or content receivers. That's on the internet, your IP address, right? So the internet assigns you like a return address that it calls your IP address. For thought in the psychosphere, this becomes our mental fields. Our mental fields interact with the mental fields of others so that we can register sometimes what comes from the mental fields of those around us. When we feel even the energies of one another, this is a bit of what's happening. And Andre Lewis talks about this as well. I actually want to read one more quote to you from this same book that helps to illustrate that, okay? So this is in chapter 17, Mediumship in the Spiritual Body. He says, in talking about the human aura, he says, viewing every active cell as a living unit resembling a microscopic engine, remember we kind of referred to this engine before, connected to the mental power plant, one can easily see that all cellular aggregations emit radiations, and that these radiations are articulated through functional synergies to constitute resources that we may call, quote unquote, tissues of energy around the bodies that manifest them. So what happens? He says, all living beings from the most rudimentary, to the most complex are surrounded by an energetic aura that corresponds to their nature. So we hear about this aura, right? You know, not just spiritism, but in many contexts, this is an expansion of our energy that can be registered by those around us. So look what he says. In human beings, this projection is profoundly enriched and modified by the factors of continuous thought, which in adjusting to the emanations from the cellular field from around the individual, a more or less radiant duplicate known as the vital body or etheric double in some spiritualist schools. Shortly after that, he goes on to comment, it is akin to a sensitive mirror in which all the states of the soul are reflected with characteristic features and in which all thoughts are displayed when they linger in strength and similarity, forming living screens, as in common cinematography. As a psychical photosphere interlaced with dynamic elements, the aura reflects a diverse range of colors according to the mental wave that we emit, portraying all the thoughts and colors and images that correspond to our objectives and choices, whether ennobling or degrading. The aura is thus our omnipresence, not omnipresent, right? We wish. The aura is thus our omnipresent platform in all communications with the pathways of others, the antechamber of the spirit in our activities of interaction with all the life around us. By means of it, we are observed and examined by higher intelligences, sensed and reorganized by fellow beings attuned to us, feared and antagonized, or loved and assisted by brothers and sisters treading pathways less advanced than our own. This is because we invariably exteriorize a reflection of ourselves in context of thought to thought without the need of words to convey the underlying sympathies or antipathies. So I shared this quote from Andre Luis because I couldn't have said it, better than that. He gives a great explanation there about the radiation of our own thought forms and energies that enable the kind of exchange that we have with one another in this psychosphere. Okay. Finally, just to summarize here, the platform that we're going to use for this comparison for the internet, as I've already mentioned, is Facebook. And for the spirits, I'm calling it the Thought Exchange. I'm giving that name to our spiritual social media. Okay, so with this sort of technical comparison, let's build on it now with a more practical comparison. What does this mean for us? And I have another table to go into that a little bit deeper. We'll start with our connecting on each of these platforms. Facebook, of course, is optional. There might be some of you watching that don't even use it, right? Because we can use or not use it. We can even be a user and log on or log off at different times. But when it comes to this psychosphere and the thought exchange, we're always online. We're always connected. We're always uploading or downloading to and from our psychosphere because it's just a natural part of life. We don't have to click on a single thing. We don't even have to be conscious of this exchange. As spiritists, we're fortunate to be learning about all this, but there are plenty of individuals among us who aren't even aware that this kind of exchange between not only two realms of life, like us and the discarnate spirits, but even us as incarnate spirits with one another is going on. You know, they're a little bit aware of that, but the overall bigger picture of our spiritual connection of all beings, there's still so much to learn for ourselves as well. And it's really something that we need to be aware of because it has everything to do with the need for the vigilance that Jesus was so insistent on, right? And telling us how important it is. Unfortunately, we can study more about it in Spiritism. Now, once we're connected, let's look at our interaction with the content that we encounter. I am meaning right now the external content that we find. And on Facebook, right, we all know that we like, we comment, we share, we follow. And guess what? We do the same thing when it comes to our interaction with the spirits. The spirits, as we've mentioned, influence our thoughts by way of intuition. And once we have an influenced thought, the question then becomes, how much attention are we going to give to it? How much time do we spend entertaining that thought? Do we answer back by giving it a lot of attention? Maybe we even answer back, like almost literally, right? We sometimes say we talk to ourselves, but are we sure that it's ourselves we're talking to all the time, right? But just in general, do we let these thoughts ruminate around in our mind? And then, do we give them a sort of mental thumbs up and take action? Do we show them love and share them, spread them around? Do we get angered by them and allow that anger to foster within us? Do we give it the angry reaction by sharing it, by dwelling on it? All questions that we need to consider, even as we go about through our day. And we have a new thought that's coming to our mind, a feeling that is emerging. And stop and think about what we're doing with it, right? What about content creation? Because we're not just connecting and observing, reacting, we're also creating. So in Facebook, we have the news feed. We can read what others post on their news feeds, and we can create our own content, put it out there for others to consume. And in doing so, we can attract followers. We can even attract fans. This happens in Facebook, and it happens as well in the thought exchange. So the friends, the fans, the followers that we have in our network in this thought exchange, when they like what we see, when they like what they see in terms of what we do, what we share, some of them can be very encouraging. And some will encourage or support us just with their presence, right? Contributing overall to the energy that influences us. But some like so much what we do, whatever we're sharing, that they want to help, meaning they want to help keep us going down the path that we're on, whatever direction that may be, good or bad. But here's the thing. The same way that our thoughts, our actions and our energies attract people of a like mindset, right? We have the expression that birds of a feather flock together. So the same way that happens with the people around us, it also happens with the spirits, even discarnate spirits, because we do also attract discarnate spirits who are on the same wavelength, so to speak. In fact, figuratively and rather literally. Sometimes it can even be spirits with a little bit higher wavelength. If they like what we're doing and they see that we have good intentions and they want to help us. And those well-intentioned, positively supportive spirits that we call our benefactors or spirit friends, our mentors, within and compared to the overall community of spirits, generally speaking, they act differently than those of a lower wavelength. The more intelligent they are, the kinder, the better their intentions, the more positively that they encourage us through their suggestions, through the signs that they try to show us, guiding us if we open ourselves to be receptive to them. And they can even set things in motion around us to help us by influencing others that we are in contact with or who have an impact in what we're experiencing. And these good spirits, meaning the ones with the noble intentions, who have an ethical approach to their own actions, who are virtuous, they don't even judge us like many people do. Even our friends, right? There was something that a fellow spiritist named Luis Sergio Marotta said that I liked. It kind of stayed with me. So he said, these good spirits, they see through us. They see through us and our imperfections, but they're like the most loving parents who would say to the child, look, I know you. I know what you have to correct in yourself, but I understand you. I love you. They understand where we've come from, right? They know what's driving us, and they're there to try to help us engage in the best way and move in the most healthy direction. So when we are responsive to the help of these good spirits, they really want to be there and encourage us. And if we make mistakes, if we fall, we get back up. As long as we can stay connected to them, they're there for us. But if we continuously reject their thoughts, they will respect that. They respect our use of our free will. They have a lot of patience with us, and they let us choose our own way. While the more ignorant spirits, right, whose intentions may be more ill-willed, then that is a reflection of how those spirits also do or can encourage us through their suggestions, through their attempts to influence us. They never tire of telling us what to do if we'll follow them. And they can also set things in motion because there are other discarnate and incarnate beings who are of the same mindset and will be receptive to their summons. But they don't have the same level of patience, right? So if we recognize that, we're feeling a temptation that is bothering us and we try to resist that, those spirits will keep trying and they will eventually tire and give up if we're persistent enough, but they don't really have the same respect for our free will and approach to trying to help us as those good spirits do. And along those terms, we need to know that in the social media of spirits, getting back to the next point on our table here, there's no snoozing, unblocking, unfriending in the thought exchange or with spirits, at least with a simple click, right? We can't just bye-bye. It's not like that. But there are things that we can do, fortunately, to protect ourselves, because we can use the thought exchange's security settings to our benefit. This takes a lot more than a few clicks, though, because it's all about our moral protection. In fact, we actually have to do things to monitor and control those moral settings every day. So what we focus on, what we give value to, what we act on and how, or who we're interacting with among our incarnate companions and the other people around us. This has a great influence in the kind of impact that the thoughts of spirits around us has on us. Now, what if we're in an environment with mixed company, discarnate or incarnate? So on Facebook, we all know that when we're in Facebook groups, or even within, a particular post of a friend, right? But I want to turn it to the groups, because in groups, there's an individual group of individuals that act as moderators. And if you're fortunate to be in a group where you have very active moderators who try to keep the harmony of the group, and people will argue about anything and everything, right? So if the comments start to turn disrespectful or of a characteristic that is not welcomed in that group, then the moderator can block the access of the one contributing them. It's different, though, when we are in mixed environments in exchange with the spirit realm. This can be anywhere, right? Because there are physical places in life that we go to where there's really a mix of who's there from the spirit realm, not to mention other incarnates that are among them in that same space. And we have an overall mix in the collection of minds exchanging with one another. So we have to be very careful, and we have to be our own admins to block access, right? We have to give others the boot if we don't want their influence by not engaging with it. Another thing that we can do is prayer. Prayer is another way that we can kind of turn up that spiritual security and protect ourselves from our own moral vulnerabilities. We use prayer to connect to good spirits who are all around us, ready to help us, right, in our thinking processes, and to see things with more clarity, to have courage. Prayer opens the door to that communication with them in that regard. Now, we also talk about avoiding our exposure to risk. So, for example, in Facebook, we have to be very careful with external apps that have a plug-in to Facebook. This is just an example, but these apps can present real security vulnerabilities. They can access content in our own computers or phones or whatever it may be that we don't really want taken from us or shared. And they can actually encourage us to share information that might not be in our best regard to do so. Well, in the thought exchange, we expose ourselves to our vulnerabilities, in our own moral vulnerabilities, as I said, through invigilance. And we can't say enough about that in terms of being careful in controlling the kinds of minds who can exchange with us. But by the way, when it comes to the outright exchange through the faculties of mediumship, this is even more important. And the invigilance in mediumship happens when mediumship is practiced without the proper education, even awareness of the significance of those interactions, and can leave really a potential for all kinds of problems. And it's also if we engage in mediumship not for the right reasons or not with the best of intentions or ethical goals in mind. In all of this, the bottom line is that like any kind of social media, in the thought exchange where we engage with other spirits, there's kind of a potential for a lot of noise, right? Noise that, number one, we have to be aware of, and number two, we have to weed through to consciously determine what we want to focus on. But both of these platforms provide an exchange that has the opportunity to enrich our lives. Even Facebook. You know, if we use it with focus and self-control, we don't get lost in there, we can find content that is educational. We can get information on things that we're interested in knowing more about. We find inspiration, and we can stay connected with those that we care about and keep up with our lives. It's really hard these days. We're all so busy, you know, going about our day-to-day activities. So Facebook kind of gives us a way to stay in touch. And the same thing, you know, our connection to the other minds around us through the psychosphere has the potential to nourish our souls if we are attuning to enriching content. And the more that we study Spiritism, the more we truly realize how this dynamic is at the center of our lives. I just want to mention a curiosity here. I was kind of amused. I was reflecting on how our language evolves as our awareness and experience broadens. So do you remember when we used to call the internet the information superhighway, right? Maybe you haven't heard that in a long time, but it's as if there was a starting point and a destination. And now we're all about the cloud. And I understand that the internet and the cloud are not exactly one and the same. Okay, so for all the technical folks out there, I know, but the cloud sure feels closer conceptually to the idea of the spirit realm and the psychosphere than a highway, right? And similarly, it still applies, but when I started learning about these concepts and spiritual influence, we would talk about like attuning to a radio station or a television channel, still the case. But now imagine how social media broadens our concept of this real exchange, not just like what you're tuning to because you want to draw it to yourself, but what you're interacting with. So just a couple curiosities that I thought I'd put out there and share. And before I close, I want to mention just a few resources for reading more about this, learning more about this exchange of thought and influence of spirits on us. So we have in the Spirits book, chapter 9, there's a section called The Concealed Influence of Spirits in Our Thoughts and Actions. It's where that question or that Q&A, the quote that I shared toward the beginning of my talk today comes from. So you can read the follow-up discussion there. And also in Genesis, you can get more like into the technical side, the science part of it, and read where Kardec writes about the action of spirits upon fluids, fluidic creations, and thought photography, right? The real material, in a way, formations that our thoughts take on. It's a great discussion, so I encourage you to go ahead and look at it. And then the novels, Life in the Spirit World series by Andrea Louise. These are fabulous for when we read in Kardec the concepts, and then we go to these books like the novels from Andrea Louise, and we see it in action. We see even their narration of what a particular individual, whether in the spirit world or an incarnate, is like thinking and feeling what they're intending to do, and how that sets things in motion in one of those two realms or in both. We see this exchange. And we talk about how books take us through our imagination to anywhere, right? They put us in situations and environments. If it's a good book, it's like you're right there. And this is what these books are like. And they help you, at least they help me, to visualize the spirit realm around me, and how they do have an influence on the events of my life and on the way that I think, even prayer itself, right? So I really encourage you to read these novels. If you've read some, why not pick up another one, right? And then the last thing that I want to do in closing today is to bring you a message from Emmanuel in this book, The Pathway, the Truth, and the Life. And this comes from a chapter called Intuition. How about that? And let me put it on the slide here. I'm going to read to you, of course, each of these chapters in this book from Emmanuel starts with a biblical verse, this one coming from Peter, and then goes on with the author's own text. So the biblical verse from Peter says, "For prophecy never had its origin in the will of humans, but very good people united to God used to talk inspired by the Holy Spirit." And Emmanuel writes, "In the divine sanctuary of conscience, people have access to intuition, and all of them can develop it towards their spiritual elevation. Great phenomenological manifestations of mediumship are not essentially necessary to establish the interchange between the visible and invisible world. All knowledge which dignifies human life came from the superior spheres. The noble ideas were not produced by the wish of any person, because terrestrial reasoning has always been inclined toward materiality and its ingrained selfishness. Divine revelation is what humanity possesses best. It is the cooperation from sublime spirituality brought to humanity by Jesus' collaborators through the exemplification, actions, and words of just men and women who succeed in breaking the circle of vulgarities around them. Doing so, due to their own effort, these men and women become instruments for the necessary renovation. The intuitive faculty is a universal institution. Through its resources, human beings receive vibrations from higher spheres, often transformed into religious, philosophical, artistic, and scientific contributions, thus amplifying sentimental and cultural achievements." And the last sentence, he says, "This collaboration from higher spheres does not happen by their wish, but by the concession of God." Just as a final comment of my own, this collaboration that Emmanuel refers to, right? This concession of God is not like a stamped permit, right? It's not a stamped permit from a ruler or like an individual called God. It refers to a natural process that takes place in accordance with divine law, which are the laws of nature. So as we mature spiritually and as we get a better understanding of divine law and the quote-unquote protocols of nature and the mental exchange with other spirits, let's employ them to access and to receive, as Emmanuel says, vibrations and collaboration from higher spheres. Thank you, all of you, for joining me this morning. Thank you, Susanna, and Biga for the invitation today. It's a real pleasure to be with you. And I wish you all a great Sunday. Let's give thanks that we're all safe and sound, having this storm that was coming our way, So glad to still be here this morning, and I wish you all a beautiful Sunday.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you here. We have about 6 minutes, so I'm going to use this time to remind our listeners to please, we have our code on the top of the screen. If you have not yet and you wish and you can make your donations, we need your assistance to keep paying our bills. Although we are meeting virtually, they're still there for us at the end of each month. We'll be moving, so we're going to need a lot of resources. We're very appreciative of everyone who can help us out. If you love letters Hector as I did, I was thinking here about, you know, this appropriateness of this topic, and people are going to come to the Spirit Center soon saying, how can I block or unfriend my obsessors?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we are asking to do. And so I think you spoke very nicely about that and what the resources we have to control, our private settings for our ongoing, like you said, you cannot disconnect from your spiritual network.
Right.
You're in it. There's no choice.
Right.
Yeah, so it's great. We need to become aware of that. I didn't mention that, but Heather is the founder of Explore Spiritism, which is available on the web. She also has nowadays every other Wednesday Explore Spiritism on Kardec Radio. So it's a great opportunity. People often are complaining or wanting more information. What is available in English? That is a great source. Not only the website that she has with lots of information, and now also the availability of the program. So check it out. Kardec Radio is a great source, also with a lot of English material. If you're feeling isolated, if you need of help, please check it out. All our videos are available on our YouTube channel. So not only Heather's lecture today, many of Heather's lectures from the past, and many other speakers from our English group are there available. And although we are close, physically, we are glad to say that we are offering so many courses in Portuguese today. Since our English meeting I have here for you, we have actually one of the missionaries of the light that Heather mentioned, available every other Wednesday at 7:15, and we have the Gospel According to Spiritism every Sunday 9:30. So please check those courses. If you need any more information, you can talk to us. And here is from Terry. Thank you, Heather. So many people happy to see you. So had also asked what book were you reading, and I think it was one of Andre Lewis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Evolution in Two Worlds.
Okay, so there it is. So the answer for you. Okay, and with that, I think we can close our meeting today. Thank you very much, Heather, once more for your presence. I'm going to. Yeah, it was wonderful. I am going to do our closing prayer. And I'm going to get you out of here for now. Thank you again. All right. Okay. So let's all raise our thoughts and just say thank you, dear Lord, for the opportunity of this morning. Thank you, and bless Heather so that she continues on her path of study and dissemination of this wonderful philosophy. Help us all to remember the teachings of today in our minds and in our hearts so that we can vibrate love, so that we can continue to cooperate with God in the transformation of a new earth by transforming our own hearts and thoughts. Bless us all. Bless all the ones who are struggling, who are suffering. So many people who are today passing away due to all the infirmities, due to the virus and everything else, families in isolation, material struggles. To all of them, May they receive your blessing and feel that we're always supported by God's love and Jesus' love in our lives. Thank you again, and so be it. All right, folks, have a wonderful, oh, not the other one. Let me see. I am going to bring Heather back. The pathway
The truth and the
to
light.
truth, yes. So
Okay.
that one, hopefully, that answers your question. So, again, guys, have a great. If not, let me know. You know how to get in touch with me, and also Heather. She's on Facebook. So be it. There you go. All right, and then we can always answer any other questions. Okay. Here, our last comment for today. Thank you very much for a very interesting educational talk, Heather.
Thank you.
Jiro, that's awesome. JC, thank you for your participation. We really, really appreciate it. Okay. Carlos, good to have you here always with us. It's just so nice to use this time and get in touch with people. We appreciate all of you who are present and who are supporting conscious living and the dissemination of spiritism in English. We definitely need your help and your support as well. Have a great Sunday, everyone. We're disconnecting right now. See you again next Sunday. Bye bye. Bye, Heather. Thank you. All right.
Bye, everyone.